Welcome to Curiously Kaitlyn. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that last week we reintroduced Holy Post Media to the world. You can find a new video on the Holy Post YouTube channel that explains who we are and what we're all about. Make sure to watch and share with your friends who are looking for faithful Christian media in this increasingly post-Christian culture. We also updated our website and merch store. You can now buy some Curiously Kaitlyn merch, along with merch from any of your other favorite Holy Post media shows. Now, on to the show.
I don't know. That doesn't make any sense.
Curiously Kaitlyn.
Hi, Mom.
Hi,
Thanks for joining me today.
my pleasure.
This week, we have an incredibly special guest, my mom. Debbie Schiess is a speaker, Bible study teacher, and ministry leader. She has served on staff at churches as a women's ministry director. She is the deputy director at Planting Roots, a ministry to military women. And she has been married to my dad, her high school sweetheart, for more than 30 years, and is mom to my sister Kendra and me. We talked today about what it was like to be a mom to a very curious kid, the kinds of questions I asked when I was a kid, and how serving in Sunday school or children's church changes how you think about the whole church. We are doing a special Mother's Day edition of Curiously Kaitlyn, and my producer Mike and I have talked about this for weeks and maybe months now. We've been like, how fun would it be if we got my mom to come on to talk about the questions I asked as a kid? No promises that they will be answered, but just out of curiosity, we were like, let's think about what I was curious about as a kid. So let's start, Mom, with what was I like as a kid, just in general?
Well, it's very funny because we just had a bunch of home videos turned into digital recently. And so it's been
Yeah.
so fun to revisit some things that were long forgotten. And we haven't even begun to look through all of it. But we did see a little snapshot of one when we were going through them of something that is so clear in my head. And that's of you standing on the stairs of our house. And we used to say that you were preaching because we had a landing in the middle of the stairs. And you would stand up there like you had a whole audience there and you were, before you were even fully talking. So a lot of it's gibberish, but just waving your hands and being very expressive. And you were a very precocious kid. This is so fun because what mom doesn't love to talk about her kids? So
Yeah.
you were a very precocious kid and had lots of questions from the time you were really small and very animated. And so anybody who would listen to your questions, you were happy to talk, whether we were in a grocery store or airport or church or wherever. And yeah, a lot of the same kind of questions that you have on your show are the kind of questions that you would ask. And so it's so fun. If you had told me when you were little that you would one day have a podcast called Curious, I wouldn't have been surprised. I didn't know what a podcast was then, 'cause but I would not have been surprised. It's very fitting because it would have been really helpful for me as a mom to have a podcast like this to listen to answer some of the big questions that you asked that I was not equipped to answer. And yeah, there was a steady supply of them for sure.
Before we talk about what questions you remember me asking, let's just talk about church when I was a kid. I've talked before on the Holy Post and sometimes on Curiously Kaitlyn about growing up in the church and having really fond memories of being in the church. But talk to us a little bit about like church for me. And I have a younger sister, Kendra, who's not even 2 years younger than me. Like, talk to us about what church was like for you when you were like young mom.
Yes, well, definitely church was a huge part of our life. And when you were a baby, I was, led the worship team at our church, and your dad was, they called him a lay pastor. He was very involved at church when you were really small. And so we were definitely one of those families that was kind of there every time the church doors were open and, really active in serving. And because we moved a lot, being a military family, we went to a lot of different kinds of churches. They all had similarities, but yeah, we didn't have that like deeply rooted church family over a long period of time. So we got to experience a lot of different church bodies,
Mm.
but usually plugged in really quickly. And so, you know, for you guys being involved in Awana and Sunday schools and church, VBS in the summertime, all of those things were just a normal part of our family life.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important to remember for me just like how many different times I encountered things about God. Like yes, being in church, being in like Sunday school or like the nursery, but also in Awana and also at home and like sometimes in like you guys had small group or there were all these different places that I was hearing things about God or people reading the Bible, talking about the Bible. Um so let's talk about what kinds of things you remember me asking about or saying about God or the Bible when I was little.
Well, you professed faith very young, and I know
Mm.
you've talked, I think, before, maybe not on this podcast, but others about just you kind of doubting that later on, like that was just childlike. But you had a very strong child faith, and
Yeah.
I the questions that you asked, about God's um, character a lot, but
Mm.
also expressing a lot of concern about people who didn't have that faith, even with your little
Mm.
sister. I mean, you were very concerned about her when she was 2 years old and not, not ready to make a decision like that. And it seemed like a nightly conversation we would have of you saying, but Kendra hasn't done this, and Kendra hasn't done this, and we need to make sure Kendra goes to heaven. And these kind of questions. So, yeah, I think from a really young age, a lot of questions about that. And then as you grew older, especially in your high school years, those questions became more about evidence, really wanting
Mm.
this faith had something to stand on and asking huge questions. I mean, I've heard you talk before about your notebook. You had this notebook, spiral bound notebook with all these questions,
Yeah.
just a real, earnestness of wanting to find answers that were solid and you weren't going to take easy answers. And so that was challenging as parents. I mean, it scared us a little, to
Mm.
be honest, when you were a
Yeah.
teenager, like um, this questioning, where is this coming from? But I'm so grateful for it because it's what laid that foundation for the kind of work you do now, is that desire to find truth and then to be able to teach that truth um, really beautifully.
Yeah. Well, say a little bit more about that because I imagine that there are parents. I don't just imagine. I get emails from parents who listen to the show who are trying to find answers because they're not sure answers to these questions, but they're also trying to get answers because they have small children that are asking big questions or they have teenagers that are asking big questions. Talk a little bit, one thing I can't do on the show is talk earnestly as a parent. Talk as a parent about how to handle the fact that you have a child that is like asking really big questions about the faith because I enjoy it so much in church, but I also send those kids home to their parents. So talk about what that's like as a parent or if you have any encouragement for parents.
Yeah, so a couple things. I think we always wanted our home to be a place where questions could be asked, where curiosity was not stifled. We didn't have that language for it at the time, but just wanting both you and Kendra to be able to talk about things, sit around the dinner table and
Mhm.
say what was on your mind and hear those things and not be afraid to say I don't know. I think that's one of the scariest things as a parent to acknowledge I don't know. Um, and then to bring in other people. I think that's the beauty of a
Yeah.
church family, is to bring in other people to help answer those questions that you can't answer in a trusted way. When we were teaching second and third grade Sunday school once, your dad and I, one of the parents contacted us and asked if I could come over and talk to their daughter because she had a little notebook, just like you did, with all these questions, and they didn't feel equipped to answer them. And so I sat on their couch with her mom and
Mm.
her, and we talked through some of her questions. And I didn't have all the answers, but I could point her in a direction of just giving her some assurance and encouraging her questions and telling her to keep writing those questions down. And it was so reminiscent of the way you were as a
Mm.
kid. And I think that's the beauty of the church family, is having other people to bring into your kids' lives and not being afraid of that, but welcoming it.
And now a word from our sponsor. Wait, what's a sponsor?
The stories of faithful Christian women have often been ignored or silenced. During Women's History Month, take some time to learn about women of faith around the world, drawing on their stories to enrich your own faith. And Glorify, the #1 Christian Daily Devotional App, can help. With Glorify, you can start your morning by reading the Bible passage of the day, diving into Glorify's daily devotional, and wrapping up with an immersive experience called Daily Walk with God. Glorify gives you quick, practical tools to help you stay rooted in Jesus while learning to navigate life with grace. And in March, Glorify will be celebrating women of faith all over the world, highlighting their stories, challenges, joys, and the role faith plays in their lives today. Visit glorify-app.com/Kaitlyn right now to download the Glorify app for free. That's glorify-app.com/Kaitlyn to download the Glorify app for free. glorify-app.com/Kaitlyn. I don't have kids of my own, but I do spend a lot of time with them at church, which means I've seen firsthand how sticky, messy, and surprisingly germy little humans can be. And when you're cleaning up after craft time or snack time, suddenly it really matters what kind of products you're using. That's why I switched to Blueland. Their products are made to meet the highest environmental standards. Their products are not just clean, they're mom clean. Blueland products are 100% plastic-free and made with certified, clean ingredients that are safe to use around the kids or even the pets in your house. You don't have to choose between the safe option and what actually gets your house clean. Blueland is for anyone who wants a healthier home and a healthier planet. Whether it's their laundry tablets, hand soap, or super effective toilet cleaner, everything is made with ingredients safe enough for kids, but powerful enough to actually get the job done. It's the reason why Blueland is trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. Blueland has a special offer for our listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/curiously. You won't want to miss this. blueland.com/curiously for 15% off. That's blueland.com/curiously to get 15% off.
Curiously,
You said something a few minutes ago that I want to go back to, which is that you and Dad taught 2nd, 3rd grade Sunday school. And I remember being pretty young, like maybe middle school or high school, when I started, and Kendra at some point started helping you with the kids. Talk a little bit about that, because I think I've said on the Holy Post, and maybe I've said on this show too, and I've said it in other places, like I had forgotten for a while that was something that happened so young for me. But when I'm thinking back to why do I just assume when I join a new church, when I joined the church that I'm at now, I had a conversation with our pastor when I became a member. And it was just sort of like, of course, children's ministry. Like that's the thing that I will do. And I, until pretty recently, had forgotten that. And then thinking about it went, oh, I think that I do that in part because that was just instilled in me at a young age. Talk about why you and Dad wanted to do that and why you wanted Kendra and I to do that. Because I think sometimes people sort of think, church for kids until they're 18 or until they're 25 is just providing things for them. And then all of a sudden at like 25, you start serving the church. But that's not how you thought about it.
Yeah, that's the very reason we did it, is we wanted that to be something we did as a family. So it was modeled for you guys and you were contributing. This is our church family. We all have a role to play and you guys can do that alongside of us. So it's bonding as a family to serve together, but it's also modeling what it's like to be part of a church body and how do we serve. And especially, I just think it's nice. We did the 2-year-old class for several years when you guys were middle school and early high school. And it was, that's the age when parents really need a break. And so I didn't want to see the parents of those kids. I think the church we were going to at a time had a requirement. If they didn't have classes filled, they would have parents have to, fill so many Sundays. And I didn't want those parents doing that. This was our time to, serve their kids and serve them by giving them that time to get spiritual nourishment too. And we didn't go to a church where kids were part of the service. I love that. Our church now is that way. And I know your church is. And I love that, having kids, everybody together as a family. But that church wasn't like that. But we served together and it was It was so fun.
Hmm.
It was, you guys weren't always enthusiastic. Some Sundays were more fun than others. I specifically remember a Sunday, it was either Easter or Christmas because the kids were all dressed up, like
Uh-huh.
all wearing best clothes. And there was a little boy wearing like a tuxedo. He must have been in a
Yes.
or
Oh, I
something.
remember this. Yes.
We had cupcakes for snack. It was a big deal. And we were also concerned about this kid making it through for picture time after church because um but and craft time too, 2-year-olds and crafts are already a stretch.
Hmm. Hmm.
Add pretty clothes and it's a whole thing. But I have so many fond memories of that time of us serving together and you guys learning what it's like to do that from a young age.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so thankful for it. And I've even learned more now as an adult watching one of my dear friends who who's the director of youth ministry at my church, how much difference it's made for her to make it a part, like a regular expectation for the
Mhm.
teenagers at our church to serve in some way. So a bunch of them serve with the kids, some of them serve with like AV stuff, or they do music, or they pass the offering plate out, like, but they feel like this is our family, this is our church, not we just play games and have pizza until I'm 20. And then all of a sudden there's this big expectation that I serve the church. Um, Mom, you have both experience parenting two young children and a lot of experience with kids in the church. And a lot of the answers that we get on this show are geared towards adults, but then we always spend some time at the end saying, okay, like what would your kid answer be?
Mhm.
Um, are there things you've learned about how to talk to kids when it comes to questions about Bible questions, theology questions, questions about God? Like, what advice would you give people who are like, I mean, because we include that question at the end because a lot of parents are like, I don't know how to give age appropriate answers. I don't know how to talk to my kids about this kind of stuff. It's just hard. Do you have any
Yeah.
advice for them?
Well, I think one of the first things is the posture you take is so important. Getting to on the floor with kids, I think is so great because when you are looking down on them giving answers is so different than if you're sitting alongside them or face to face, eyeball to eyeball. And I think that matters. It matters to kids, to see. It's something I've seen you do really good job with. And some of my favorite pictures of you at like Holy Post Live events are you, you know, uh, down with the kids. Your dad is so good at this. We go to he's immediately down on the floor with the kids.
Mm,
And sometimes they're crawling over his head, but I think that's one of the important things. And yeah, encouraging their questions. I mean, the way you do your Sunday school lessons of letting those wonderings happen, I think is so beautiful because kids have so many random questions and too often in church, we want those questions that could derail a conversation. We kind of cut them out
yeah.
instead of just acknowledging them, answering them, and moving on. Um, and then that cuts down their freedom to ask. So, um, letting it be okay if they ask some wild, weird question and have that just be part of it. I think for parents, one of the things that is becoming lost is meal times. And
Mm,
um, for our family, that was so huge. I mean, we had meals around the table every day,
every day.
except for
Yeah.
Friday night pizza night, that
We were
watching.
still together.
Yes, we're still together, but
Yeah.
every other day, family dinner was just a part of our family rhythm. And I think um, that's when kids ask some of their best questions. And so having those conversations just to feel normal, like everyday conversation. So kids aren't like having to hold this in and then burst out with a question, but they can just, that's part of your family rhythm.
Mm,
And I think the same thing in church, that I love the way that your church does that of just these wonderings. And it's just part of the every week rhythm is asking questions and it being a safe place for kids to just, yeah. And even to have doubting kind of questions. I think that's where, as parents, sometimes we can want to shut that down like, oh no, I want my kids,
yeah.
that's every Christian parent's, greatest prayer is that their kids grow up to follow Jesus. And so when you hear those doubting questions, it can be scary. And so instead of reacting in fear, respond with invitation of
Mm,
tell me more about that and tell me where those thoughts are and what do you What are you afraid of? And,
Mm.
let the kids express that instead of falling into your own fear.
Mm. Yeah. Um, Maybe you have already answered this, and so many of the things that you've said are good answers to this, but this is a Mother's Day episode. So I'm just imagining, particularly for mothers, maybe mothers of precociously curious children, annoyingly curious children. Like, what encouragement would you give as someone who does not have small children anymore to the moms in particular who might just be like, it's constant. I get all the, we joked in church the other day that you get the like, why? And there's just a never ending, and, and they're like, it sometimes is really funny, meaningful questions. Sometimes it's just like, come on, why are we asking these questions? So what would your encouragement be? By the time this comes out, Mother's Day will have just been like a couple of days before this. To the mom specifically, what would you say if they're like, I mean, I'm glad that yours grew up to like have a podcast about curiosity, but mine is driving me crazy.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and I have for sure had those days too, and I think that the classic, "The days are long and the years are short," is the answer that most moms who have already passed those years would say because there's a longing to, "Oh, what I would give to just have a snapshot of a day of back then," you know? Of course, it's a snapshot, not be
Yeah.
but that is I mean, that is the thing that gets you through a lot of times is going, "I have to hold on to some of these things because they will be gone, and this time is short, and it will pass far faster than you can imagine." And so, and knowing that you are investing in something that is going to bear fruit. I saw a video when I was a younger mom about, um that parenting was like a masterpiece. You can only see parts of it at a time. The whether it's a beautiful painting or building a beautiful building, you can only see a little part of it at a time, and you can get so focused on that little part that
Mm.
you miss the beauty of the big picture. And I think parenting's a lot like that. You're tired, and sometimes those questions are relentless, but when you're sitting by your child's bedside at night, I mean, that was always a really sweet time for us with each of you. And it's so easy to rush through that, but to hold on to those moments because they are fleeting. And then all of a sudden, your kid's a teenager and has no interest in you sitting by their bed. And so, yeah, when you're feeling tired, to just remind yourself that these are precious moments that you will not get back. And so, um, take that question. And if you're too tired, say, "We'll talk about that tomorrow, sweetie."
Yes, I love that. I love that. Um, any last things, Mom? Something we haven't talked about, a story you've been dying to tell, anything that we haven't covered yet?
Well, one of our favorite family stories about you
Uh-oh.
is kindergarten. Um, because you were so earnest in your desire to tell other people about Jesus, and you went kindergarten on the bus, and we followed you to school, the first day because I wanna make sure the bus got there and you got off
Yeah.
okay, and you came off of the bus, had already made your first friend. Her name was Elizabeth, and you, when you came off at the end of the day, you were holding hands with Elizabeth, and she was your new best friend, and
Oh.
you came home talking about how horrified, I think is the right word, how horrified you were that she did not know the song "Jesus Loves Me," and you were
Mm.
gonna teach her that song. It's the sweetest thing, and you did. You taught her the song on the bus, and you were great friends that whole year, but it was the beginning of that, alongside your sister, desire to share with someone else, the
Mm.
truth of who God is, and the thought that she was going to be living without that was just really sad to you.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and so I just think it's just a sweet story, but um, yeah, it shows just, and this is where I have to do my mom mushy moment. But just how proud we are of you that you've taken all of that curiosity and turned it into something so beautiful and allowed God to
Mm.
use it for His glory and to serve the church, because that's what every parent longs for is their kids to grow up loving Jesus and serving others, and you've done that really beautifully. So I'm
Aw.
really and really. blessed to be your mom.
Oh, thanks, Mama. You got me crying and you're crying. She didn't tell any of the stories of me doing annoying things or breaking things or being a brat, but I did that too. Thank you so much, Mama, for spending this time and sharing these stories. And thank you for being the kind of mom that gave me space to be curious and ask big questions. And for everyone listening who's like, okay, I'm taking notes because my kid will be totally fine if I do all these things. Not true, but I will say I constantly am pointing back to my parents when I think about my faith because not only did they give me space to ask big questions, but I never my whole life doubted that you two genuinely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the fact that that changed everything in your lives. And that is a real gift to me. So I love you, Mama.
I love you too, sweetie.
One of my favorite things about this episode is how my mom talks about curiosity and fear as pretty much opposites. When parents or Sunday school teachers or mentors or big siblings respond to kids' questions with fear, wait, are you questioning God? Oh no, what if they ask something I don't have an answer for? It shuts down curiosity. The same is true for us grown-ups. When we approach the Bible, theology, or God himself with fear, what if there aren't good answers to my questions? What if I learn something scary or bad? What if I learn one thing I always believed was true is wrong and my whole faith comes crumbling apart? We'll squash our own curiosity. Let's learn to seek truth with joy, not fear. Curiously Kaitlyn is a production of Holy Post Media. Produced by Mike Stralo. Editing by Seth Gorvet. Theme song by Phil Vischer. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus cute kids, and never any butt news.